Thanks. So today we are going over the implementation framework. If you want to go ahead and open the slide deck on your own and follow along, that's fine. And on the first slide are the links to the meeting slides, the agenda, the equity screening tool, the activity sheet, and the feedback survey at the end. So Wendy is putting the links in the chat as well. And then the second slide for Q&A is really, you guys feel free to put extra stuff in here. It's editable, so you can use it however you think is helpful. But at the end of the last round of meetings, we had some questions from the other working groups. That one question was, how does today's equitable implementation relate back to the not so great outcomes we identified last time? So if you'll remember back in June when we did the impact mapping, we were identifying some cons associated with the strategies. There are some potential ways that our strategies could backfire and create some inequities. And so we do want to consider that in those key next steps. Be sure that we are setting ourselves up for success and we are centering equity so that we don't have any potential negative implications as we roll out these strategies. And then the second question was, how is our exercise today not simply signing other folks up to do the work? And I think we addressed that pretty well last time. This is really just a brainstorm discussion, trying to think about who, what other organizations and stakeholders should we consider contacting to assess their interest as we begin our implementation journey. And that's what's going to really help this plan be unique and be really inclusive and be community owned. Once again, this plan is, that's why so many stakeholders are involved in this. That's why you guys were invited to come help us from the start, because this is a community owned plan. This isn't an Office of Sustainability plan. And then the third question was, what's the difference between a community organization and an equity partner? And just to kind of spell that out a little more, for our purposes, the equity partners are those organizations that have a mission to specifically serve and support the frontline communities of color, or communities that have been historically excluded from traditional planning activities. They might prioritize a specific neighborhood, be thinking about those that might support specific regions of the city or groups of individuals, or provide resources to those communities. And then the community organizations just have a broader scope. So they, it's the equity partner column is just another opportunity to really consider other organizations that center equity that might not come to mind first. All right. Hi, Tracy and Jeannie. It's great to see you. We're just quickly going back through. This is going to be a repeat from last month, and then we're going to quickly go into the breakouts and finish up the strategy. So it's not going to take the full 2 hours. I think we can get through it pretty quickly. So far, were all of you here last month? I guess raise your hand if you weren't.
I was not here.
Okay, great. So
I wasn't here.
All right. So then I will just take a couple minutes to go over the objectives for today. We'll quickly review the framework that we're discussing. This is kind of a 3-meeting series. So the July meeting was the part 1. This is part 2. And then the next meeting is going to be part 3. And that's really laying out the implementation framework for all of our strategies. So today, the objectives are to really build out the equitable implementation and accountability framework for each strategy, looking at readiness, equitable next steps, implementation partners, and funding and financing mechanisms. And I'll explain those a little more in the coming slides. You're all familiar with the group expectations and ground rules, and you do a great job with that, so I don't need to read them again. But just keep in mind that this is, we're really grateful that each of you is making time for this process, and we want to respect each person's perspectives and expertise and lived experiences. So thanks for listening and sharing. Where we are in the process, we're still in this plan, at the end of the plan development phase. So we're getting there, very exciting. And just to remind you, we've gone all the way through all these levels of the draft structure of our plan, and we're down to the implementation phase. This is just, again, for those of you who missed the last meeting, this is taking the impact mapping and moving it into implementation. So that impact mapping exercise had us looking at the outputs and outcomes and impacts of each of our strategies, the prioritized strategies. And so using those outputs and outcomes to equitably develop the next steps, and then the impacts are going to help us ensure accountability and transparency. So it's just this very iterative process. I hope you've been with us all along, so you've seen how we've been doing this and building on each other. Nothing's been lost along the way. We have some great content. All of your really intelligent, brainstorming and contributions and feedback and input has been captured, and it's just kind of building on each other. So that's the overview of the strategy refinement process for this summer. And so now I'm just going to go back over this equitable implementation and accountability framework. It has all of these components. So today, last meeting and today, we're going through each strategy and looking at what's in green, the funding and financing mechanisms, the readiness, the equitable next steps, and the implementation partners. And then next time we'll be talking about indicators and accountability and transparency. And then what's in small print, the timeline and the costs and the city steward, those are things that our office will be working with other departments to help build out, to align with budgets and align with other goals. Think a little more intently about costs and budgets and which department might be the best to be the representative city steward for each strategy. So those are going to be done in-house, but these other ones in larger font are the ones we're asking you to help us think through. So a little more specifically, you can see the definitions here. The readiness is really just the status, what activities are already occurring and what might be needed to get the strategy off the ground. The equitable next steps are those things that we want to be considering when we think about immediate next steps to equitably roll out the strategy. We are not developing the entire implementation plan for every single strategy. You guys are the ones who developed these strategies. So as we hand them off to whoever, we want to make sure that we're giving them what they need to hit the ground running and be successful. So thinking about those first next steps is what that's all about. The implementation partners are other departments, community organizations, or private entities that can assist with the implementation. And funding and financing, we don't need to spend too much time on that. That's a harder ask to really think about how we're going to pay for this. But if you have good ideas, we certainly want to capture it. So to go into each of those a little more specifically, I want to make sure you understand which what the structure of these strategies are. So if you'll remember, there's a strategy, kind of an overarching statement. This example is municipal composting initiatives, and it says provide education about and options for composting at city-owned properties and events. So this is the one for city-owned buildings and properties and facilities. And the three activities that were rolled up under there to make it actionable and smarty are: 1, conduct organic waste and diversion education and awareness activities. The second subcomponent is provide options for composting in all city-owned buildings, parks, schools, and facilities, and at city-operated events. And then the third subcomponent is make compost and mulch available to city properties, residents, and small businesses. So that is the structure we're looking at is the strategy and 3 subcomponents. And so as we develop the implementation next steps, we're breaking it down to those subcomponent levels. And please stop me if anyone has any questions as we go. All right, so the readiness, just to explain that a little more, the readiness describes status, and the key question you'll want to ask yourself is, what is the most appropriate readiness category for this subcomponent? So is it already ongoing? Some of these strategies, I think pieces of them are already ongoing or underway, and there might be additional steps that we want to add to it. So we want to note if there's something already underway. If it's just ready to go, it hasn't started yet, we need to identify, kind of capacity and priorities and resources to get it going, then it means it's ready to go. It might be aligned for implementation with another city plan, maybe Richmond 300 or RVA H2O or, a transportation plan. So please note if it's aligned with something else, and we could kind of go into partnership with that. Maybe it requires city action. Maybe there are policy changes that we need to implement, maybe a new policy or an ordinance. And then if it requires state action, that means we can't really take it any further until some kind of new legislation is passed. So we certainly want to note that. So this is setting the strategy up for success, understanding where it is now and where it needs to go to get off the ground. So that's readiness, and that's a pretty quick conversation. And then we jump right into the equitable next steps. And this is where the equity screening tool is really helpful. And that is on the link to that is on the first slide of this slide deck, or Wendy just put it in the chat. And that helps us really think about the next steps necessary to make this the subcomponents or the strategies equitable. So you'll want to first, kind of the exercise walks through what are the first next steps on a practical level, and then start thinking about what equity gaps, what major equity gaps or disparities could this strategy address. And then once you identify what those are, then think about, okay, well, how can we prioritize the rollout of this strategy? And that really helps us get center equity and get us off in the right direction. And then the next part of the exercise is walking through the implementation partners. And this is, thinking about who is essential to the decision-making process, and then who also could benefit from the success of this action. Invite them to the table. A lot of times, when you really think a little harder about who else could benefit, then you've got a little more of an investment, right? You have some more resources. And then, of course, very importantly, what frontline or historically underrepresented community members or organizations should be included in this. So we want to be thinking about city departments. We want to think about community organizations, any private sector. A lot of times that's helpful, of course, with sponsorships and partnerships. When we consider any private sector representatives, and then equity partners is giving it that extra lens of those communities that we want to include in the conversation. Let's see, so that's the implementation partners. And then the last piece, which again, this doesn't require a whole lot of we don't want to take too much time on this here because it's a more complicated ask, thinking about how we can finance all of these, but it is really important. The transition to a net zero resilient Richmond can't be funded entirely by local property taxpayers. There's just not enough money there. So we need to think about creative and innovative approaches and strategic investments by both the public and private sectors. We want to think about grants, partnerships. Of course, if it's loans or bonds or budgets or taxes or fees, that's something that we'll have to be thinking about pretty strategically from the finance internal perspective, but prioritizing budgets is really hard. So the more we can align with, matching grants or or aligning with expanding existing programs that we know about in the community that we could partner with. That's what we want you to be sharing with us. If you have some good ideas like that, we'll capture that here. So that's really what we're doing today is we're walking through, we did most of them last time. And so we, well, more than half, I'll say. So we're going to split into 2 groups and finish them up. So again, what activities are already occurring for the readiness? What are the key next steps? Centering equity into the strategy rollout. Who can assist with implementing those next steps? And what does financing look like for this type of strategy? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and put everyone into groups. So if you would prefer to stay in the main room with me and go over the industrial objective, which is industrial waste advocacy and environmental justice, and then construction and disposal standards, you can sign up to stay with me. If you want to go talk about commercial recycling and residential waste management and finish up those objectives, then you'll be with Wendy. So feel free to call it out and Wendy can put your name there, or you can type it into the slide yourself. And it's 9:21, so we'll just take a few minutes while I set the breakout room up, and then we'll send you on your way at 9:25. But feel free to speak up if you have any questions.
I'll go to Wendy's group.
Okay.
May I be in the industrial group? This is Jeannie.
This is Tracy. I'd like to be in Dawn's group.
This is Ryan. Can I be in Wendy's group?
Okay.
Oh, we have a cute dog joining us today.
Cute.
All right, well, I think I got it figured out. So, so your facilitator will have the slide up, and we'll be typing in and adding your thoughts. If you want to open it up and type anything in yourself, you're welcome to do that. The link was on that first slide of the slide deck. Otherwise, like I said, when Wendy's group finishes, I think you have a few, a couple fewer than our group. I don't think those numbers are right. I think it's more like
Yeah.
something. So when you're done, you can come back to the main group, and we're a pretty small bunch today, so we can finish up what we need to finish together. And again, I think we'll end early. So I'm going to go ahead and send you on your way, and I'll see you when you get back. Oh, I hope I set it up right. Let's make sure that
They left. It looks like
Yeah, the only thing is if I didn't give them permissions to come back early.
You're
Let me,
locked out.
yeah, let me just send one quick text.
Oh, take your time.
I'm still here. I'm just gonna, I'm out in the field trying to release a mouse from a sticky tab. So,
Oh my goodness. Okay.
yeah, but I'm here.
Such good work. Thank you.
We had an exterminator come because we're overrun by ants, and he put sticky tabs out. And apparently, we have mice too because one got caught in one.
Mm,
That's a horrible way to figure that out.
Yeah.
Right.
yikes. Okay, so we are talking about industrial waste advocacy and environmental justice. The strategy says protect communities from industrial waste through legislative advocacy and more stringent requirements for industrial waste producers, disposal, tracking, and siting. The first subcomponent was implement measures to identify the potential impacts of new facilities on neighboring communities. And let's see, so we went through, we said it's aligned, it requires some city action. The next steps: meet with DEQ, Environmental Justice Coordinator, and develop protocols and measures to ask and specific questions to ask that would identify these impacts through economic development and site plan approval, such as special use permit questions, and incorporate into comprehensive master plan and analysis of larger scale plans. So that sounds great. And then what are the major equity gaps or disparities? Well, lack of knowledge prevents users from asking for the right permits. So do you guys have any ideas about or any other equity gaps that we might want to consider, and how could we equitably prioritize the rollout of this strategy?
Sorry, I'm just taking a minute to process, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot.
Yeah, I'm doing the same.
I mean, I feel like this is kind of driven by what the new facility is and where it is. It's not really, I'm trying to think of it in the perspective of the rollout of it versus the execution. Are they different? Because again, in reacting to a new facility, I guess it's making sure that we're each of those previous steps in the protocols and measures are the things that are equitable, I guess. Trying to back into the meaning of it.
can you also, sorry, Dawn, I'm in the PowerPoint having some trouble looking at the objectives. Is it in the meeting invite? It's hard for me to read on the screen, and there's so many things to to think about.
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, so the activity link, can you open the slide deck, or that's what you want?
Yeah.
It's on the first slide, the link to this.
Understood. Copy. Sorry about that.
No problem. And I can also just make this bigger if that would help. But the objective is reduce industrial waste, and then the strategy is advocacy and environmental justice. So we're talking about meeting with the DEQ Environmental Justice Coordinator, develop protocols that would identify the impacts through economic development and site plan approval. There is an equity gap when it comes to the lack of knowledge, and asking, maybe we're talking about from the new industrial sites. Is that because they're the ones getting the permits,
Well,
right?
it shouldn't be them asking for the permits. It should be them being told what the permits
Yeah.
are.
Oh, okay, so
I mean,
so staff
Yeah,
training.
that's great. Yeah.
I see
but still knowledge and awareness is lacking. And the more that it can be a part of the process in the applications and the all that you have to go through to get any kind of permit to do anything, my gosh, there needs to be all of this kind of language. It needs to be, maybe it's a complete redraft of the permits themselves.
Well, and I'm wondering if in order to get the permit, you have to, I don't know, you have to go through an education process yourself that's free, or that your business is incentivized by doing it, so that you're almost you're taken through all the steps and why it has to be done, and everybody gets the exact same thing. I mean, if it's a requirement, then everyone's got to do it.
I guess I see this question as being less kind of concerned with the industry themselves and their acquisition of the permit. And I see the equity rollout, because industry is industry. Like, I don't think that we need to prioritize like that. I don't think that equity is the focus there. I think that what I see is within this lack of knowledge is like the fact that permit notices aren't written in plain language. The fact that hearings for these sites are often not in the communities that they're permitted in, right? So like if you have a permitting for something in Danville, the hearing for it is in Richmond. So the people can't they have to take off work in order to speak to something. That is where my mind goes, but maybe I'm misunderstanding what the purpose of this subcomponent is.
I think we're getting at it. I think
I agree with that. But I think, in looking at just that one subcomponent of implement measures to identify potential impacts is kind of where, trying to like complete that thread is where that was coming from, because it was the new facilities that are creating the change. And absolutely, by creating, ways for these neighborhoods to have input. I know that typically there is a way, even locally, to make your voice heard. Is it ever really heard? Who knows? And where does it go after that? So that could probably use a lot of work.
I think that's good. So what departments or organizations or private sector entities should be involved in this as partners?
Oh, the DEQ, for sure. I just want to throw one more possible idea on there, which is like implementing measures to identify the potential impacts of new facilities on neighboring communities. Wouldn't that just be bringing the public into the process from the get-go? Like requiring some sort of community liaison member or whatever for literally the beginning of the permit, rather than here's the permit, we want your feedback now. Like just being present every step of the way. Like I don't know how much of a help or hinder that would be, but I think that if we want to implement measures, like one way to do that might be within that world. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. So then in order to do that, I think it does require more of a partnership with
different nonprofits and things like that.
Yeah,
like also faith organizations like churches. I see other sorts of like planning commissions and things like that. Like what is zoned for what sort of use, I think is a huge part of this conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah, especially when you have like Black and brown communities that have been zoned for industrial use, receiving the brunt of environmental injustice,
Right.
So I think that is something for like city departments. Yeah, PDR. I'm kind of at a loss for private sector stuff, but maybe y'all know. My mind just never goes to the private sector for whatever reason.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what would help us, make sure that everyone's on the same page, that it's more successful and sustainable if we can kind of align, certainly from the get-go, like you said, that's the best way if you can align everyone's kind of mission from the start, because if you go in too late and money has already been spent, then that's when you start clashing and derailing. So
Well, yeah, it is defining new measurements of no, that cannot be that close to that neighborhood. That neighborhood was there first. It has to be 50, whatever.
Well, I think it's also, I mean,
8
my
miles
neighborhood's a
away
perfect
or
example. My neighborhood's a
100
perfect example of that. There's a soil mediation plant right under Highland Park, and the smell is toxic. But
that's
that's
awful.
already zoned for that. So what do we do to make sure that that doesn't become, this toxic industrial park down there, because it is zoned for it.
Yeah. And there's two things then. There are the current and how to deal with the current, and then the
Right.
future and how to keep it from happening. I know
Right.
I've got one of the pipelines. I've got a petroleum pipeline running back here. And one busted 10 years ago in the neighborhood, 2 neighborhoods away. It was awful. It was a nightmare.
But
yeah,
like the city will look at that and say, well, it's zoned for that. What can we do?
oh yeah. And there's no money to fix anything. What are you going to do? Move the house or move the pipeline? Either one is like not feasible. So
Right.
there's the current, making those safe and everything, and then the future, and not doing this anymore, not doing this again, not running horrible hazardous stuff through neighborhoods. Vice versa. It's like one comes first. If the building's out there, don't let a developer, if a big plant is somewhere, and don't let a developer build a neighborhood. Whatever comes first, there has to be guidelines and buffers to protect each.
okay. So if you can think of any other partners or funding and financing for that, let me know. Otherwise, we'll jump to the second one. Advocate for state and regional policies that reduce industrial waste from facilities in frontline communities and those in floodplains or flood-prone areas. So in terms of readiness, advocate for policies that reduce industrial waste from facilities in frontline communities. I think that requires state action.
Yeah.
Well, advocating doesn't require the state action, right? Like the end goal is state action, maybe, but like the advocation is like partnering with different groups that have the capability to lobby or things along those lines, maybe.
Right, but I know from lobbying for the city of Richmond, there are certain things that the state has to allow you to do as a lobby, to be able to lobby.
She makes a point, though, in order for anything to happen, there does need to be some pressure saying that this is important.
Right.
People. So advocate, I guess the first step then is something like identify I guess we need a sense of, like House Bill 704 State Environmental Justice Policy and House Bill 1042 Virginia Council on Environmental Justice. Like we need to understand what those say and what's missing from them, or if there is some new language that we can advocate for.
Mm-hmm. I see this also as being like maybe the job of like RVAgreen 2050 here in order to promote equitable like understanding distribution is to like train folks to have conversations. I'm not saying direct those
Right.
conversations, but train, like hosting trainings with public information about bills or whatever it may be, and being like, this is how you talk to a legislator, not dictating what people say in the room, things like of
Right.
that nature. I think that giving folks the tools to self-advocate for these policies is maybe the avenue of that like outreach and things like that.
Right.
And that partner is VCN.
Yeah.
That's a great point. When we lobbied, lobbied for the city of Richmond, the city actually held a 2-day event, and everybody got a very small stipend because they were,
Yep.
communities where folks couldn't necessarily take off the day of work without being paid for it, or childcare or whatever. And for 2 days, they paid everybody maybe $25 or $35 a day and fed them and trained us on what the issues were, what the key talking points were, what the impacts were, and how to literally how to lobby.
Awesome.
It was like a 2 or 3 day event, and it was extraordinarily helpful. And the city identified, the proper stakeholders. They did a great job of that, because we were lobbying for money from the state for the city, so
Yeah.
they had a stake in it. So it can be done. That can be done, and you can find money to do it, clearly.
That's great. What was that example you gave?
That was the city of Richmond asking citizens to lobby on behalf of the city of Richmond when the General Assembly was in session.
When was that?
Oh gosh, Annie Giles was still alive. So maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
So, Dawn, this might be a good time for me to mention, and honestly, I've been plugged into it from so many different angles. I want you to, from your city perspective, to investigate what you're going to have access to, what this group may have access to from the American Rescue Plan funds that are flowing apparently freely through all the municipalities. Hanover County has so much money they don't know what to do with it. So, these programs and these initiatives are all a part of, if not this infrastructure, all that, the bill that hopefully is about to be passed, that's money for the next 5 years. And so there is going to be, I don't want to sound like unicorns and rainbows every day, but there will be a lot of money flowing through the environmental organizations from municipalities. And so I'm, just sitting here trying to figure out where this project, I know where you sit in it, where this project fits in it, and who needs to start talking to the city about using some of that money to implement some of these initiatives. So if you know someone in your budgeting office that could give you any insight on what that means to Richmond and the possibility for any of these programs, I would start there. That's not the end of it, though. Governor Northam has a surplus he's going to look to get rid of. We just need to position ourselves, and it sounds more urgent than it is. But this will be the nature of the environment for the next 5 years. So we just need to position ourselves with really good ideas that are ready to go, and get in front of the right people. Like, right now they're in special session. So they're determining where to put all this money. And a lot of it is going into tourism, and a lot of it has to do with frontline workers in these communities. So do your research. I'm still finding out new things here and there. I was worried that we had missed the boat, Keep Virginia Beautiful, back in June, for not getting any kind of a proposal for the special session, but I was told they weren't listening to earmarks. There was no room for earmarks. This was just sending money down to the DMOs to then decide where it goes. And this would be right in line with what the 5 things that this money is supposed to go to. The American Rescue Plan money is what I'm talking about. So anyway, I can talk more offline. I don't know, that's basically the chunks that I know, but investigate and do your research.
Yeah, well, those conversations are happening. I'm not in them. I was part of a group a year ago when we were trying to think about, getting ahead of it, and it's a lot of infrastructure projects that were the priority.
Yeah.
And now I know that Alicia Zatkoff has been having conversations on a team that is talking about this, but I'm just not sure what the latest and greatest is. But it's a good point about, knowing that the conversations are happening is one thing, but being really smart and strategic and positioning with like projects, right? Like how, ideas of how our work, can funnel directly into that is something that we can do. So be, as you come up with smart ideas, please share them. Is basically my request. Okay, so then any other for all of the partners on this advocacy team, who can I put down here? What are your ideas? You said VCN. What does that stand for?
Virginia Conservation Network.
Yeah, and all of its affiliate partners, I'm sure, will want to do that sort of thing too. They already do town halls and
they do the
lobby days and things like that. So I think also it might be interesting to, and again, I don't know, but like to partner with schools. I think that it might be like cool to be like your civic duty as you know what I mean? Like in this country means a lot of different things, and it means you have access to your legislators, and like democratic power can be shared. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think that might be neat. That you can do different levels of conversations.
Yeah, I like that.
I would suggest also seeking out each locality or municipalities if they have something like we do in Richmond, which is the Clean City Commission. We are constantly looking at these issues, not just residential waste and residential recycling, but also we're starting to move into corporate waste and recycling, and seeing how the job of the Clean City Commission is to advise City Council. So it would just be a natural fit to get folks who are already doing that and advising their locality, their municipalities, leaders, get them involved because they are direct stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the ones that are advocating, for certain regional policies.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, great. And so then incentivize waste reduction programs and manufacturing processes that minimize greenhouse gas emissions. Is that ready to go, ongoing, requires some action? Requires some city action to develop those
Requires
incentives.
city action and money, really.
So, do you know of any existing programs that exist? Work with waste diversion and recycling task force established by the DEQ to align practices and policies. That sounds good.
I mean, there's Virginia Green Travel, which certifies some businesses. There's Veridiant that certifies businesses for green practices. I don't know if that fits in. I'm trying to read into it. Incentivize waste reduction programs and yeah, I mean, that's it's a program that helps businesses reduce and minimize their greenhouse gas emissions through all types of activities, but it's mostly, yeah. Does that make sense?
Align with certification programs like Virginia Green.
Virginia Green Travel and Veridiant, which is a larger business, not travel group that does that work. There's also another one. Oh gosh, it was before Leeds. It was right around when Leeds became it was like the standard for green. Oh, if I think about it, I'll add it later. But those two are those have programs that I know of.
Okay.
Manufacturing processes that I know less about.
I feel like there must be bigger programs out there.
Yeah.
That we should learn about.
Okay.
So what are equity steps on this one, or equity gaps?
I think a lot of that is like meeting folks where they're at, especially if you're trying to like train them, which means making sure that every event that you're hosting has childcare options, means, things like that, perhaps. Making sure that wherever you're hosting trainings is accessible by public transit. Those are kind of like more logistically minded, but that's where my mind jumps to.
So I'm wondering, so with that in mind, I'm a little bit confused. Are we talking about incentivizing waste reduction programs for, for the industry? Are we targeting the industry there?
I think so. I think what she's talking about is more about the advocacy part, right?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I went back.
It's okay.
I was
So, but lack of education, certainly.
I guess I'm interested. Sorry, this is maybe I'm jumping around all over the
That's
place.
fine. Yeah.
It's a confusing spreadsheet, or not confusing. It's just there are many things. I'm interested in the penalizing manufacturers for pollution being next to advocating, when I think it should be next to incentivizing waste reduction.
Yeah, that was just someone's note. So let me
Okay.
penalize industrial. Yeah, you're right. Let me just move that.
Sorry. Oh, I'm getting myself more aligned. I think that is, I only had so many things spread,
Yeah, no, this is just a huge jumbled brainstorm. So we're all in this together. Okay, so I like working with them. And then this penalize industrial manufacturers for pollution and contamination, encourage reductions. I do think that that watchdog, like, are there watchdog groups in Richmond that keep an eye on industrial waste? And
I don't know of any.
I feel like Food and Water Watch is like kind of living within that realm, at least on a more statewide level, but I don't know.
what is it called?
A Food and Water Watch.
Can you think of any other partners on this?
I mean, Chesapeake Bay Foundation. I'm trying to remember who my civic association got in touch with when they tried to build on the wetlands behind us. I know that we talked to the Bay Foundation. I know that we talked with, oh gosh, shoot. I have notes somewhere. We did call an organization that came out and looked at the area and did an assessment. and then reported back to the city.
Hmm.
I need to find out who that was. And then if I find it, I'll shoot it to you. I mean, that was so long ago. I'll find it and shoot it to you. Maybe we can work it in after this is over.
Yeah, that's great. In terms of funding and financing, incentivized waste reduction programs, is it just programmatic? Like we'll give publicity and marketing and positive feedback, or can you think of other ways to incentivize?
I mean,
a tax
breaks.
incentive.
Tax breaks
Yeah.
are the way that tax breaks are the way that
Yep.
industry really responds. Or a tax credit, or there's a program in the city of Richmond that targets small and minority businesses and women-owned businesses, and I don't know if it's still in existence, but it was very popular for a while. If you had to make purchases for large pieces of equipment, and you were a minority or woman-owned business in the city, they would reimburse you for part or all of that equipment if you agreed to locate in the city. And then of course, Bon Secours had that great East End program where they gave like anywhere from $6,000 to $20,000 grants almost every year for businesses that located in the East End corridor. That's how Proper Pie Company got started, and a few other businesses right along there. So monetary rewards always seem to work. And I mean, those were two really very successful programs. So
I'll put them in the notes. What were they?
The Bon Secours program, their East End initiative, I think it was called.
Okay.
Where they gave grants to businesses that were willing to locate in that East End of Churchill. Proper Pie Company and Sub Rosa are both two really good examples of who they funded for multi-years. And then what was the other thing? The City of Richmond equipment reimbursement program for minority and women-owned businesses. And I'm not sure, but I think Rostov's Coffee, Tammy Rostov told me about it, and I think that she may have benefited from that. You can't quote me on that, but those are examples of.
Great.
Really delicious examples.
They are delicious examples.
What was the coffee?
I'm
What?
super Rostov,
Rostov.
ROSTOVS.
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that one still exists because there's some equipment I need.
Oh, she's there. Hey, Dawn and guys, Jean, Ellie, I gotta go. I have to
thank
go hop
you.
on another call. It was great
Yeah.
to see you guys.
You've been
Bye,
so
Tracy.
helpful. Thank you, Tracy. Have a good
All
day.
right.
You
Take
too.
care.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, great. How about require external and transparent industrial waste audits with findings published to identify potential impacts on the surrounding community? It's a great idea.
Yeah.
There's some privacy issues, so external and transparent. I think it's gonna need some kind of city action, right? To
City action and maybe even state legislative action.
first we have to identify privacy issues and existing waste audit protocols, because existing, it's just not good enough. What else? What are the equity gaps we could get at with this?
Maybe like making sure that information is like comprehensive and understandable, because if they're publishing audits and it still doesn't make sense to most normal people, then what good is the audit?
That's a great point.
So maybe hosting like little info sessions post audit. This is what it means. This is what, like,
Yeah, hosting info sessions is great, but then again, that like you said, if unless there's childcare, unless they do it when
Right.
people can get time off from work, unless they can take the bus there. So if there was some kind of online thing that people could refer to when they're looking at it, they can just go to that guide and say, oh, that's what that means. Or they don't have to go anywhere to access that. That would be really helpful.
Okay.
I mean, isn't it crazy that almost every single one of these comes down to economics, transportation, childcare? Like those are always,
almost always, yeah.
always.
Yeah. Okay, how about partners? Any thoughts? And any funding ideas for all this information sharing?
I mean, I feel like the DEQ should do this.
Yeah.
I feel like the DEQ, they're having audits. Most of these permits, if it's hazardous waste, whatever it may be, have audits anyway. It's just, it needs to be transparent. And it needs to be a continued public conversation, right?
Right. And that's possible. I mean, think about it. The city of Richmond every year, and whether you get your water bill online or not, you get something in the mail that says, this is how pure the water is. This is how polluted the water is. And they put it in language that every single person who gets a bill can understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's possible. And it can't be that expensive because the city wouldn't do it otherwise.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right, well, then let's jump on to our last one here. Construction and disposal standards require new and updated standards for industrial waste generation, tracking, and disposal. The first subcomponent is develop and update construction standards and protocols to require environmentally friendly and equitable processes, include required permit siting and staging for recycling and composting, add requirements for construction and demolition material recycling and reporting. There's a lot in there.
Yeah.
So city action to update the standards.
This is kind of it's stressful to think. I just can't even.
It's really looking at what we already have.
Right.
One thing we need to put together is an updated high performance building policy for the community and include siting and stage, like basically lead requirements for the community. And then you do have to consider your recycling staging and composting staging and where the materials are going. I think that last part about add requirements for construction and demolition material recycling and reporting, when it comes to waste management, reporting's terrible. It's, contractors that are combining loads and they're just, you don't know where it's coming from.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's hard to keep track of where it's going because it's a commodity to them. So they're going to sell it to the highest bidder.
Right.
So it's really hard to track.
Yeah, we've actually been talking about this on the Clean City Commission because we feel like this is, it's great that we're trying to get residents to dispose of waste and compost more effectively, but really where it's at is getting all the new construction in the industry to get on board with that, and getting the city to be more aware of how all this is happening. That's not my expertise, so I don't know what the answers are.
Well, it's also stay abreast of best practices.
Yeah.
And,
You know, a few years ago, when they were talking about putting 100 apartments in the field across the street from our house, I did a lot of research and went to the city of Portland, Oregon, and asked them for their plans for their city public housing, which had all gone, it was like all LEED certified, beyond LEED. It was amazing. And they were building up instead of out. So the houses, the footprints were smaller, but they were taller. And they were, all environmentally much more friendly than anyone else was doing, and much more ecologically sound than anyone else was doing. And they sent me everything. I got these huge packets with everything you needed to know, including plans, like the blueprints. And I turned them over to the city and they threw them out. Didn't even look at them. Yeah, I know. Yeah, they threw them out. My city councilwoman was like, you know what? They threw all that out because I asked for it and it was gone. So, what do you do? How do we do this when it doesn't seem like the city is interested?
Yep. Great point. I
mean, do we get stakeholders involved in getting the, developing and updating the standards? Do we get, like, I don't know, local architecture firms? Can we identify stakeholders and get them to lobby? That we have.
Okay, so this kind of helps me think about the equity gap. I've had some great conversations about building requirements for new development with Mosley Architects, for example. There's a new fire station, and as the sustainability person, I'm like, okay, well, how can we ensure that it's solar ready? And what about the electric vehicle charging? And where are the materials coming from and going? So they have their LEED framework, and the architects are on board. So I think that's something we can have a little more say in. Existing is tricky.
Yeah.
But when we talk about waste management, construction and demolition, material recycling and reporting, and you think about the contractors and what demographics they typically represent, the drivers and the ones that man the sites where all these materials are dumped, in my experience, I don't know if it's just lack of it. It's just not a priority. They just want to get their paycheck and go home, and they don't want to examine loads and ensure that the loads are covered and that there isn't a hole in the tarp. And then if you do find the driver, then you're cutting back on his paycheck and it's not hurting the company. So there's a lot of equity gaps in this, but I don't know how to address them without making it even more inequitable.
Well, so that's a great example. I mean, it seems like it comes down on the guys that are actually doing, or the people that are actually doing the work. But what if we make the corporation or the company responsible for that? Like, your guys aren't doing it.
But then they get their guys get written up.
But then their guys get written up, but why can't we write up? I mean, who's to say we can't write up the company too and say, listen, you're not training them properly. You're not.
Right. Becomes an OSHA thing.
Almost. Right. You know, you're not training them properly. You're not educating them on why this has to be done. And you don't have, spot audits where somebody from the company shows up at that, I don't know, shows up at the city of Richmond dump to watch them load this stuff up and take it away, or shows up at the construction site and they do a spot audit like they do at Capital One when you call in to get your rate fixed and they say someone might be listening in on this conversation. So if they're not doing the due diligence and making sure that their guys are doing the right thing, then they should be penalized for that as well.
Mhm.
Okay, any partners that could help with this? It's inspectors, and
Yeah.
it's PR.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about the inspectors, but how many times are the inspectors really out there? Unless,
Yeah.
That's what happens. In my last locality, we actually held a training with stormwater inspectors because they've got this long checklist, and we wanted them to make sure that because what happens is the construction workers throw all their plastic bottles, all their waste into the pit, and then they build the building on top of it. Yeah. So they would, like they're out there looking for safety stuff. They want to make sure that the berms are, properly dug and that the silt
yeah,
fencing is up and all of that. And
20
so
years
we're-
later, an apartment building falls down in Florida
right.
because it's built on plastic bottles.
I don't know. So, I mean, it's not that many, but
Right.
they're throwing their trash, their,
Right.
lunch trash in the pit.
Uh,
So it's like these inspectors, they've got 10 inspections they've got to get done in their day, in their 8 hours, and they're out there looking at 100 things and checking off the list. And we want them to also go and make sure that everything's staged correctly and all the trash is going in the right thing. And it's like trying to get them to prioritize that. And it's kind of like when I do energy audits and I expect the custodial staff as the last one out to make sure that the lights are off and the thermostat's turned up and they're already not being paid enough. And they're like, I just want to get home to my kid because, so-and-so has to go to their shift. And it's like, how do you hold people responsible and make this a priority when it's just not their priority,
So do we ask them do we ask municipalities to create a new position where somebody, like, they inspect specifically this? I mean, that sounds like a huge ask too.
Yeah.
Do we take it off of their plate and put it on, create a new inspector position so that's all they do? I don't know.
It's more taxpayer stuff, but
Taxpayer stuff.
jobs are really hard to get approval for with local government. I'll tell you what. All right. Well, these are great ideas. Can you think of any partners that could help? Inspectors and planning and development review. Certainly any, industrial associations, I guess. Construction.
There's got to be a construction alliance, right? Like that lobbies. Like there needs to be also like talking to the unions. I think might be good because they're gonna have something to say about it. I don't know what, but they're gonna say something.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Right.
Okay. How about promote and reward those companies earning zero waste certification? That sounds happier. I think that's, ready to go. Let's figure out what that promotion and reward looks like. Sounds like a great Clean City Commission program.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of like quarterly business award or?
Well, yeah, funny you should say that. We were just actually talking about creating that. The Clean City Commission, just so you know, was pretty useless, to be quite frank, for a really long time. And then a lot of new blood has now joined the commission, and a lot of younger folks who were more interested in just more than just having a recycling event twice a year.
Great.
And so where we've actually created a lot of new committees. There's one that's, industry and business. There's an education committee. There's a partnership, community/corporate partnership committee. So they're all really, really interested in the work that we're doing, the waste working group in particular, and the roundtable in general. And they're asking to partner in any way they can.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. So I sent, oh my God, what is wrong with me? What is her name? Starts with a K.
Katrina.
Thank you. I sent Katrina an email last week about all of that, and I know she's really overwhelmed. So I'll just follow up with her. And if you see her, just mention that you and I talked about it, because they all come to the table, the folks on the commission, with experiences and ideas that, some of us don't have. So
I love it. I would love to plug them into some of these strategies.
Yeah.
Like I keep picturing each one of these strategies as like a little package, like a kit that I want to hand off to a task force, and I'll do everything to kind of like network and collaborate and report on, but we need to get the like teams together to run with it. So
well, they asked me at our last meeting last week before last, they asked if anybody from our groups would be willing to join our next, whatever it is, Zoom meeting or whatever, to talk about what we're doing. So if you're interested, would love to have you come and kind of cheerlead this and
absolutely
put that kernel out there. All right.
Yeah, let me know.
Officially invited, and then I will send you all that information and put you in touch with our chair so that you guys can meet beforehand.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I see the other group joined us, and so Jason came back before I closed the room.
Well, we were gonna just go ahead and leave because we weren't sure if you saw my little message. So we were gonna just leave. So maybe he was in the process of doing that or something.
Oh, that's what you did, Jason? You
Because he was frozen on our side. You froze on our screens.
How did you do it? You're muted. How did you come back?
What Brianne said. I left the meeting and then I clicked the link back into the main meeting.
Oh, got it. Okay, yeah. So sorry about that. There's this one extra step when you set up the meetings that says allow them to come back to the main room. And I didn't realize that I didn't select that until I'd already sent you over there. So I had sent Wendy a message saying, text me when you're ready. And I didn't look at my phone for a couple minutes. So sorry. But we're almost done. We're having a great conversation. We're on this last objective about, let's see, develop protocols and cost considerations for responsible recycling and disposal of solar panels, batteries, and other byproducts of renewable energy and weatherization upgrades. So this is like all the stuff that we're promoting in the buildings and energy pathway. I think it comes to like our high performance building policy, probably.
Right.
Does anyone have any ideas on how we can make that equitable? Are there any equity gaps on that? I think the siting, as we think about those products and where those scrap yards tend to locate, we want to be really cognizant of where those facilities might be popping up.
Right.
Any other thoughts on next steps, partners, funding on this one?
Would this maybe be something where you could potentially partner with private industry, like processors who do this type of thing, as opposed to like the city trying to create stuff, or I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah.
I mean, does DEQ already have protocol and this?
I'm sure they do. I think there's just kind of like, we need to identify what the gaps are. Like, you know, there are all kinds of protocols in place, but why aren't they good enough in some cases?
So maybe we need to figure out what those protocols, what the existing ones are now.
Okay. Any other good thoughts on this? Okay, great. Well, then we did it, guys. We got through them all. So we went into breakouts and we came out of breakouts. So then in terms of wrapping up, general reflections on that. How did your group do, Wendy?
I think we had some good discussion, particularly around the pay as you throw, which, and I know Brianne captured some good notes on that, as far as we might not even be ready. Is it a good strategy? And if so, other strategies need to occur first before that one could really be implemented. So that might be for a future 5-year increment or something like that. But yeah, but otherwise I think we had some good discussions and thoughts on the various things. So
Great. Anyone else have anything you want to say? Any report backs?
Yeah. Some of these, I mentioned it in our group that some of these are top downs and they need more bottom ups. So people creating the waste before the consumer need to be stepping up for funding and, processing, reduction of waste.
So start with the manufacturers. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, Brianne, do you want to kind of share this first bullet about the last meeting and see what their thoughts are?
Yeah, sure. So just real quick, as we're thinking about the last of our series of 3 meetings on implementation and accountability, we wanted to check in with each of the working groups on when you would prefer to have this meeting. It's currently scheduled for the week of August 23rd, but we know, some schools are starting that week. People are taking summer vacations, all of that. So just wanted to do a quick check-in on your preference, whether we hold the meeting that week or do it in mid-September. So you can either, if you have the slides, you can just click on that link, or on your phone or your browser, you can go to menti.com and type in that code. And it's just a quick poll, which do you prefer? Or you can also choose that either works for you, and I will put up the results in just a couple minutes.
Does not work.
Doesn't work?
Doesn't work.
I got a huge job that week and I got to be at work. I'm going to miss it if it's that day.
In August?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we are giving it to all the other groups, like she said, so we'll just have to kind of see where we are. But it is an important conversation because it's, getting at the accountability and how we're measuring success of this plan. So we're almost there, guys. Thank you so much for your great contributions. I really can't thank you enough. If you have anything you want to share with this small group of who's left, I will send out a follow-up with that Menti poll so we can make sure that we have some good turnout for the last meeting. Yeah, it's pretty split. It's so funny. This is the 3rd group we've given it to. So we'll have to see. We have 2 more working groups to poll. But other than that, thank you for coming and have a great day. Not here to
Thanks.
see me.
Thank you all.
Hey, you guys, the Saturday, September 11th, your boy is going to be teaching a class on conservation landscaping at Sneed's.
Oh, cool.
Wow, awesome. All
Middle of the
right.
day. See you
Sign
there.
up.
Okay,
Oh, I
great.
love it.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jason.
Jason. Have a good
Bye.
one. Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye. Look at that big smile.
That's how he got frozen earlier too. He was like,
So funny.
oh, let me stop the recording. Sorry.
There he goes.
Stop.
All right. So any